Welcome back everybody, my name's Nick930 and this is my final review for State of Decay 2. State of Decay 2 is the sequel to the 2013 Xbox arcade game and features many of the same open-world sandbox mechanics that fans from the original have come to love. But it also builds upon that with a better visual presentation, smoother animation work, and more in-depth community management options. But unfortunately, this game also features many bugs that can hurt the overall experience. But before we talk about all those bugs, let's look at what this game has to offer in terms of story. Just like the original game, State of Decay 2 focuses more so on the gameplay than it does on strong narratives. You won't be stopped by any cutscenes or dramatic interactions between characters like you would in more modern AAA games. Instead, most of the dialogue between characters happens through text bubbles, or through radio updates from nearby survivors. After a long tutorial segment that has you completing various missions to explain the game mechanics, the game lets you off the leash, and you're free to explore and build your community as you see fit. The game's progression is based almost entirely around your community's growth, and as you save more survivors and build more advanced structures, you'll eventually be forced to move to larger communities and start over. New to State of Decay 2 is the option to choose from 3 entirely different maps. Each map features its own unique characters, meaning there's some decent replay value, something that will be key for cooperative play, and Undead Labs has confirmed that they plan on building more maps as expansions later. The game will end rather abruptly once you reach a certain level with your community advancements, and there's no distinct narrative like the original game, and aside from relocating your community to a new map, there's no real escape like before. Everything you do in State of Decay 2 is centered around expanding your main base and recruiting survivors. The gameplay remains mostly unchanged from the original game. After a lengthy tutorial segment explaining some basics, you're set off to loot nearby buildings, find valuable supplies, and transport them back to your main base for distribution. Each building in the world is marked on the map, and after scouting from high vantage points, you can determine which buildings have the potential resources you're looking for. And the resource placement actually makes sense. Veterinarian clinics will have medical supplies, restaurants will have food, gun stores will have bullets. To search a building, you can sneak in the doors and start looking around for glowing crates. Just like in the last game, none of the loot will be on the ground, and the number of lootable locations will be displayed on your heads-up display, making it a breeze to confirm that you've completely searched a building. Each character has a weight limit and a slot limit. Each type of item takes up 1 slot in either your backpack, pockets, or hands, and you'll find searching only a few buildings will require you to offload your loot at your main base or outpost. Since each item also has its own individual weight, you'll also find that being over-encumbered will drastically affect your stamina, which can be dangerous if you get stuck encountering a horde of zombies. In addition to some smaller items like weapons, crafting items, and health items, you can also find large duffel bags. These items are critical to the game and are used to resupply your community. Communities have specific needs like food, medicine, and ammo. There's also fuel and materials which are used to expand your base. These resources will automatically deplete for various reasons, like someone accidentally knocking over your fuel, or a zombie horde attacking which will eat through your bullets. This mechanic is interesting but seems to happen a bit too often when starting off, making it a chore to go back and forth micromanaging your resources while you try and balance finding materials to expand your base, but also keeping your survivors happy. Morale is the most critical component of the game, and keeping your community happy will go a long way in having a successful playthrough. If your community's morale is too low for too long, you'll run into a ton of problems, like members of your community leaving and stealing resources. This should all be familiar to veterans of the original game, but the system goes a bit deeper than it ever did before, with more buildable structures designed to boost morale, and even upgrades and modifications to existing structures that will improve the quality of life. Modifications can be applied by locating special components in the world, like portable generators. Each modification enhances the associated structure and can offer things like morale boosts or an increase in the resource production. State of Decay 2 also has you managing relationships with other communities. These neighboring communities called enclaves can either be friendly, neutral, or even hostile, depending on how you treat them. You'll often receive radio calls asking for assistance, which adds a marker to the map and a new side objective with a timer. If you don't assist them in time, that community could end up becoming hostile, forcing you to kill those survivors if you get too close. I never ran into any opportunities to convince hostile enclaves to become friendly in my playthrough, but I feel like there should be. There were several instances where I was trying to save a neutral enclave from zombies, and they became hostile towards me just because I shot around them, which ended up canceling the side mission and forcing me and my allies to kill them. Now, I did manage to get some decent weapons off of their bodies, but it also cost me some valuable survivors, something that's important when expanding to larger communities. And you're going to need those weapons because State of Decay 2's zombies are more ferocious and deadly than ever. All the same zombies from the original game have returned, like the standard walkers, the feral, tanks, screamers, and bloaters, and combat functions mostly the same, with players needing to use melee weapons to smash their heads, or risk using firearms. And I say risk because sound is incredibly dangerous in State of Decay. Loud sounds like shooting guns, knocking things over while looting, or breaking into houses will trigger nearby zombies to investigate. It's often advised to sneak around the world carefully, especially if you plan on keeping your character alive. The combat does feel a bit smoother than it does in the original game, with nicer animations and unique takedowns. There's also some special combat moves that can be unlocked through individual character progression, which can be a lot of fun to play with. But each action will consume stamina, and you'll need to carefully choose your battles. In addition to standard zombies from before, you'll have to contend with blood plague zombies. These zombies aren't really any more difficult than standard zombies, but have glowing red eyes and often travel in hordes on the roads. You'll also find a lot of these zombies near nesting sites called plague hearts. Plague hearts function a lot like the infested sites. The player will need to run in and destroy the plague heart while also fighting off hordes of zombies. If these blood plague zombies bite your survivors, not only will they lose some health, but an infection meter will appear above their minimap, indicating how close they are to catching the disease. If a member ends up with the blood plague, then you'll need to either heal them at a medical center with some valuable medical resources, or put them down. And remember, if you choose to put them down, that character's gone forever and will never respawn. In fact, every character in the game is irreplaceable. There's no main character in State of Decay 2. Each character will develop skills and experience separately, and if they happen to get overwhelmed and killed suddenly, that's it. That character's dead. In fact, the character might even turn into a zombie and attack your other characters if you don't destroy the head. This permadeath mechanic is what makes State of Decay 2 so unique from tons of other zombie games on the market. Looting for resources is a huge risk, and you'll need to balance how much weight you're willing to carry with the items you'll need to bring to keep yourself alive. Each character can be upgraded by performing specific actions like shooting or melee combat, and if you reach 10 stars for any of these skills, you'll be given a choice between 2 different specialties, like a special combat move or increased health. In addition to ranking up your character's personal abilities, you can also increase their standing, which basically determines their rank in your community. If a member reaches a high enough standing, they can be promoted to a sheriff, which is essentially the leader of the community, and unlocks some unique improvements to your group. Having a well-rounded group of upgraded survivors is key to exploring the unforgiving world of State of Decay 2. You might even want to bring AI companions along with you on journeys to hell. Just keep in mind that even if your AI character is killed and you're not controlling them, they will not come back. There were several instances where I found my AI being a complete idiot and nearly dying, forcing me to quickly switch to them and get them out of harm's way. Which brings me to the biggest problem with State of Decay 2, the bugs. State of Decay 2, much like the original, is plagued with a ton of bugs and glitches. Zombies will get stuck running into walls or attacking the air, they'll get stuck on rooftops or in the floor, and sometimes you'll even fall on the floor. Occasionally, doors will appear open when they're actually closed, and sometimes AIs will block doorways. I even ran into an invisible bloater on the road, which nearly killed my characters. But the bugs get even worse when you decide to use the brand new co-op mode. The game's online infrastructure feels incredibly unstable, resulting in a ton of desynchronization issues. There were multiple problems with client-side rendering that made the game nearly unplayable. My flashlight was set too far back, causing the shadow to render parts of my character model, making it really hard to see. Getting into a car with a third player caused his character and name to spaz out, which was incredibly distracting. At one point, our host player started a mission where we need to clear out a large group of zombies, and those zombies just appeared randomly on my screen and then proceeded to teleport around, forcing me to run away to prevent my character from permanently dying. And then there was this annoying reoccurring bug that made it so players could not find the storage locker in the main base, which is the only place where you can drop off items taking up space in your backpack. These bugs make co-op mode pretty much unplayable, which is disappointing because the core gameplay has a lot of promise. Assuming the co-op mode did function correctly, Undead Labs made an interesting solution to how you benefit your own save while playing in someone else's game. Now, you won't be able to collect main resources like food or medicine duffel bags. Those are instead donated directly to the host player's community. But smaller items you find in the world like weapons or health items are saved to your own community. Each building has a set amount of lootable containers for each individual player, marked by their own color. Player 2, for example, will only be allowed to loot from blue crates, and any loot aside from large resource duffel bags is theirs to keep. If that player's character gets tired, they can switch between any of their own characters on their save to join in, but they cannot interact with the host survivors. It's an interesting design choice, and it seems like the only solid solution to ensure that players can't exploit another player's world and add an insane amount of resources to their own save. But again, the bugs make this cooperative mode less enjoyable, and I personally prefer playing the game in single player until the issues are ironed out. State of Decay 2 also sees a substantial improvement to its presentation thanks to the switch from the Crytek engine to the Unreal 4 engine. The color palette is much brighter this time around, and more inviting than the drab, reddish appearance of the world in State of Decay 1. The world feels more alive this time, but it also takes away a bit from the original's aesthetic. The original game wasn't necessarily scary, but the mood before it was more of an apocalypse, whereas in State of Decay 2, it feels like the apocalypse has just begun. The lighting is enhanced with some nice bloom effects, and performance is significantly improved this time around, with only a few stutters upon first booting up the game thanks to the internet services being enabled. Textures are often bland, and character animations, while better than the original, still look pretty weak. But overall, I think the game's presentation does a good enough job. The biggest problem, however, is the game's default field of view and forced motion blur. The default field of view makes it almost impossible to see, especially when you're moving around inside of buildings. You can improve the field of view on PC by editing some configuration files, but the motion blur seems to be forced on, which users who dislike motion blur will likely not be a fan of. If you're playing this game on the Xbox One, the game will be locked at a 30 FPS at 4K, which is a bit disappointing considering the system should definitely be able to handle this game. On PC though, you can unlock the frame rate and it looks and plays so much better. So overall, State of Decay 2 improves a bit over the first game, but is played with a ton of technical problems. The gameplay is fun and addicting, especially if you're interested in survival micromanagement style of games, but its lack of a distinctive narrative might not be for everyone. The gameplay functions well with lots of depth to its character progression and tons of upgradable structures and even upgradable vehicles. Things like being able to fuel up your car and needing to manage infections adds a lot of detail to the experience, and the game's $30 asking price seems more than fair. I hope they do end up fixing the game's bugs and get the co-op in a more playable state, but if you're willing to look past the occasional bugs, then you'll have a great zombie simulation experience in State of Decay 2. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and if you want to see more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe for more content posted every week.